over 35 years' experience in the healthcare, human services, and nonprofit world, Paul Boynton has been recognized for distinguished service and excellence in nonprofit management. He's the president and CEO of the Moore Center. He's also the author of several books, including Begin with Yes, and hosts the TV show of the same name. He also writes the business column Beginning with Yes for a New Hampshire Business Review. He has blogged for the Huffington Post and the Good Men's Project, and is the host of Begin with Yes on Empower Radio. Paul lives in New Hampshire with his partner Michael and their lovable golden doodle, Toby. Paul Boynton, welcome to the Games and Writers Show.
Hey, it's good to be here. Took us a little bit of time to get all the technology figured out, but we did it, and we're talking, and we can see each other. So
that's the important part. Yeah. It's all worth it. So I do want to start off by talking a bit about the Moore Center. Could you tell us about the mission of that organization?
Sure. The Moore Center serves people really of all ages, from really birth through death, and our mission is to create opportunities for people to have a good life. And the people that we serve are people with intellectual disabilities, brain injuries, and more recently, we've been serving elderly people too who do not have those challenges. And the whole thrust of our operation is to provide services for people in the community so that you're keeping people out of institutions, so out of group homes, out of large residential facilities, keeping elderly people living in their own homes, out of nursing homes, and all of those kinds of settings for a few people are necessary and appropriate, but for the vast majority of people, they don't want to be in an institution, and they would prefer to be living in their own homes or in places that feel like homes in their communities, living lives just like you and I do. So that's been our mission, and it's amazing really how easy it is to create environments that keep people happily engaged in their communities, living good lives. And that's
amazing.
What we focus on. I think, not to belabor the fact, but the whole concept of a good life is like your idea of a good life is probably different than my idea.
Sure.
And so it's allows us to sort of say to all the people that we're working with, what does a good life mean to you? And then we support them in making that kind of a life happen. And we're really just trying to create the, sort of just opportunities by leveling the playing field a little bit. So people with intellectual disabilities have a few things working not in their favor. And so we're here to say, how can we even things out so that they have the same level of opportunity that other people have?
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're addressing an issue that is present kind of across the board in various areas where people are generally faced with like a one-size-fits-all solution, but it doesn't, right?
Yeah, that is so true. And I think that's been, it's like the sort of the old way of providing services was to create programs that you would put people into rather than to create individual solutions and game plans that meet people's individual needs and preferences. And we're pretty much all alike in that we want to have a good life, and we're different in being able to describe or articulate what that good life means.
Yeah, well, New Hampshire's led the country in its reassessment of services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, moving away from state-run institutions and, as you were talking, toward a more community-based service approach. What are some of the main benefits of this transition? I guess we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but what's some of the differences, the stark differences between the two models?
I think one represents a very artificial sort of pushed off to the side life when you're living in an institution, and the other recognizes that everybody has gifts to share, and being part of a community is what really, most people are drawn to be with other people in some form or shape, and the more diverse the group of people you have around you, probably the more interesting your life is. And so we're saying just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you have to be put off to the side in a separate space, but you can not only benefit from being in the community, you can actually enrich the community and by being a part of it. So it feels like that's the common sense approach to providing services to people who need them. And when you think of elderly people in particular, the reason we got into the elderly population is because we recognize that so many elderly people for sometimes very small reasons being pushed into nursing homes. So they're no longer able to prepare their own meals. And so you move them into a nursing home when if you could help with meal preparation, they could stay in their own home, be in their neighborhoods, have company when they wanted to. And so especially with the elderly, sometimes it takes a very small accommodation, an adjustment to their life to make them able to stay home. And I don't hear too many people saying, I can't wait to go into a nursing home.
Right.
Most people
Right.
are saying, I want to stay home. I want to be around my furniture and my wallpaper, and I know where my refrigerator is, and I want to decide when I want to eat, not eat when people decide that it's time for me to eat. And it's
Right.
amazing how many individual choices we make all day long, like what time do we wake up? What do we decide we're going to wear for clothes? What are we going to do? Do we have our coffee first thing, or do we step outside and smoke a cigarette? Or
Mm.
it's like we all have different rhythms. And when you get forced into sort of an environment where the environment's creating how your day unfolds, then it becomes very artificial. And you can see why people tune out and,
Yeah.
uh, and lose interest.
I think it's great that you're reaching the elderly population because, in a lot of ways, well, in many ways, the familiarity becomes more important. It seems the older you get. I mean, I'm even seeing it now. I'm relatively young, but a decade or so ago, it would mean nothing to pick up and move across the country, start over. But now, especially now I'm seeing with my grandmother. I
Right.
mean, she wants her stuff around her, even
Right.
though a lot of people might say, "Oh, those are small trinkets," but to
Mhm.
her, that it means a great deal. So it's important that you're offering people that. But moving on to some of your other endeavors, Begin with Yes is kind of your flagship project, it seems, other than the more center, spawning books, talk show, a Facebook page with a whopping 2 million fans. Tell us about this. What exactly does Begin with Yes mean in practical terms?
It's funny. I before I wrote the book, and before I even created the Facebook page, I had this idea, this image popped into my head, and so many of the things, at least my experience of them is that they're ideas that just pop into my head rather than me sitting around trying to create an idea. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like I don't necessarily sit down with a pencil and paper and try to create ideas. Ideas, some at least for me, seem to pop into my head more
Yeah.
often than not. And that phrase popped into my head. And I have a very good close friend of mine who actually was a homeless man from New Hampshire who had this idea that he wanted to do a Broadway play, and he wrote the music um, and he got people to record the music, and then he followed people around in New York City trying to get people to listen to his music. And
Mm.
I'm going to skip tons of steps in between, but he actually found people, producers, to put up money to bring this show to Broadway, and it was called Brooklyn the Musical. And he was from New Hampshire. He knew nothing about show business. He didn't have any theater contacts. And it's a very complicated, Broadway is a very complicated business, but he found a way to make what he wanted to see happen. And he has become such a good friend of mine. And he was such an idea person that I sat down, I was having lunch with him, and I mentioned the phrase begin with yes. And he said to me, that's a powerful phrase. And so that gave me the confidence to begin taking as a CEO, I've often had to do public speaking, and I found myself historically always talking about being hopeful and optimistic. And I had written tons of speeches, so I had a lot of material
Mm.
that I sort of was able to repackage around the thoughts about begin with yes. And when I first heard that phrase, I was convinced that the word yes was the most important of those three words. And since that time, I've learned that the most important word is the begin word,
Mm.
because yes sort of implies um, sort of a place you've already reached, and not everyone has gotten to that place where yes is the first thing that comes into their mind. In fact, I'm surrounded by people that their first response to a new idea is no, why it won't work. And
Right.
so I'm programmed to say, yeah, why not? Let's give it a try. But other people aren't. But the powerful word really, and yes is a powerful word, but the more powerful word is begin. Do
Mm.
something. Take a step. And I find um, that there's something beautiful about people who are feeling stuck, and we all feel stuck from time to time. We have writer's block. We don't know what our dreams really. We don't know what our passions are. We don't know how to turn our passions into a dream.
Mm.
And I always say, well, even if you don't know all those answers, you can begin taking actions towards something, and then you can always redirect. And once you're moving, you're not stuck. It's impossible to be moving and stuck at the same time.
Mhm.
So I love the word begin. And so if people are listening to this and they're feeling stuck in whatever way, they don't even really have to figure out where they're going, but they have to take some action, be in movement, and that somehow enlivens or awakens an ability to keep moving. And does anything ever go as planned? I mean, like does anything? So having like a big plan for your life doesn't work. So you might as well just we really are forced into going one step at a time, no matter what. So that first step is I guess I've learned sort of the second step is actually harder than the first step. But once you get moving, then there's a rhythm to your life and things begin to happen. So I tell them the story about the guy, Mark Schoenfeld, bringing his show to Broadway, because if he focused on how ridiculous that was to have as a goal, it never would have happened. And so he just created music, and then he literally walked around New York City with a boombox, trying to meet people, which he eventually did. And
That's
then
amazing.
to finish that story, once his show was on Broadway, which was a huge accomplishment, he would go in Times Square. There's a ticket booth where you can get half price tickets the day of a performance. He would stand there all day telling people to go see his show. Um, and I can guarantee there is nobody else with a play on Broadway that was standing in Times Square introducing himself to people, giving them his telephone number and saying, this is the best show in town. And after you see it, here's my telephone number. Call me and tell me what you thought. So he actually got people into the theater to see the show and kept it going for 10 months. So it's kind of a
That's
remarkable story.
an incredible story.
I can get off topic so easily. So bring me back if I go there.
No,
And
no, you're fine. I mean, it just feeds right into the next question, which was, one thing about Begin with Guess, that it does seem to emphasize personal action. And a lot of self-help books that I've looked at and I've read, and programs, they don't really go much further than saying, believe in yourself or be positive, just get better at smiling. But it's clear that you're making it very clear that the principle of action and personal responsibility are key.
I think that's really true. It's like when 10 years ago, there were so many people, and I think people still do this, but there was so much talk about how we could manifest things in our life by acting as if we already had them.
Mm.
And that, I think there's some value in that, and I don't discount that as part of the process. But I think at the end of the day, stuff begins to happen when we roll up our sleeves and actually do something. So sitting around imagining that you have a new car or acting as if you have a new car is not as effective as saying, well, what kind of a new car do I want? How much does that cost? What's the down payment? Are there any cars like that may be used and available online? It's sort of like doing things that you're more likely to end up with the car you want if you're actually doing something rather than just acting like you already have the car, which is, and I'm sure I'm simplifying that approach to manifesting things, and I'm sure there must be more to it than that. But I felt like that was kind of a trap. It sort of encouraged people to not take action, and it's like, I don't know, things don't just, I mean, sometimes things do just fall out of the sky and fall into our lap, but usually it's when we do things, take action, that we begin to see things actually happen.
Yeah, one thing that kind of bothers me or worries me about that approach is that it generally doesn't work in my experience for what I've observed. And so people are left let down, discouraged with a lot of regret. And so it makes the problem worse when it doesn't happen for them. But a lot of people, they do spend a lot of time agonizing over regrets, past mistakes. What advice would you have for those people who are looking to start again?
It's like it's to sort of recognize, first of all, that we're always starting again. Every
Mm.
time we wake up and begin a new day, it's a new beginning, and that if we focus, we have to choose where we're going to focus our energy and our attention. And maybe that's just where the power of positive thinking comes in, because if we find that we're focusing all of our attention on things that are outside of our control, and all of our past regrets and mistakes, missteps that we've taken, regrets that we have, those are all sort of informative, and help us grow and learn how to do things differently. But there's nothing really that we can do about those things. And
Mm.
so we have to keep our focus. I say to people all the time, why do you focus so much attention on things that you have no power over, and you completely ignore all the things that you do have power over? So it's I don't know whether it's human nature, or it gives us a free pass to not be more responsible and more
Mm.
engaged in what happens in our own lives. But if we sit around thinking about all the power we don't have, and we completely ignore all the power that we do have, then we're just totally missing the boat. And so if you are feeling powerless, I would say, what area of your life do you have power in? You might not um, be able to get that new car today, but you could go online and find out how much that new car costs, because then you've taken a step, and now you have a focus for what you would need to do. If it costs $10,000, then you could say, now what? I love that question, now what? And that's what keeps me moving and gets me to shift from thinking about all the things, all the mistakes I've made, or all the things that have gone wrong. It's like, all those things are true, but now what?
Right.
Now what? And then that forces you and moves you into a place where you become action oriented. It's a powerful, um, challenging question to ask yourself.
Yeah, well, now what? That's the key to all narrative. I mean, if you're writing a book, a fiction book in particular, that's the question you keep asking yourself to keep the plot moving. And I think adapting that to real life makes perfect sense. It's just such an easy segue. But part of me wonders if fear plays into it. If people take
Oh, yeah.
responsibility for steps they could take, then they also might feel responsibility for any possible failures. But if you only look at stuff you can't do, then you're not really responsible if something doesn't happen. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it's again, at the end of the day, it's sort of like if we're waiting for the universe to solve our problems, or make our dreams come true, then it's sort of misplacing the
Mm.
accountability. It's really, um, it's if I have something that I want to happen in my life, then it's up to me to make that happen. It's so easy to find people or things or circumstances or feelings to blame. What the fear is like, I'm scared all the time. I mean, it's sort of like life is scary, right? It's like if I let being scared be where I stopped, then I wouldn't do anything. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's sort of like, I think we can let go of waiting until we're not scared to do anything. I think our real power is from, oh yeah, I'm scared, and get in line. Everybody else is scared too, and but what can I do anyways? And then it's very empowering to do something, even though you're scared. Uh,
Mhm.
and you know what? The truth of the matter is, it doesn't always go well. You
Right.
might be, and I've done this. You might be scared to do a public speaking engagement, and you do it anyways, and you don't do a great job, and it's a
Yeah.
disappointment. Um, but even that is far better than the person that didn't step up to the podium and
Yes.
not do a good job speaking, because by not doing a good job, you learn something about what you need to do, so that the next time you might do a little bit better. And we judge ourselves so harshly.
Mm.
And the it's not only us that we hurt, but it's sort of like, our willingness to judge ourselves means we're willing to judge everybody else. And so that place of judgment, it's like this is something I personally have to work on a lot, making judgments about other people, other things, because I'm more inclined, if I'm inclined to do that about you, then I'm probably doing it to myself too. And so if you can find ways to, and the way I have found is to hold myself a little bit more accountable when I find myself being judgmental. And I just came from a lunch meeting where I was expressing judgments about all kinds of things. Um, it sort of gives me an opportunity to be honest with myself about what I am doing and ask myself, how does that benefit me? How does that benefit anybody?
Right.
By me being judgment. And I'm a big believer in reframing things. And once you begin doing that and tell people that that's what you're doing, then other people will help hold you accountable. They're saying you're being judgmental here. Um, it sort of can become fun, and that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you eliminate judgment, because of course you never get to that place, or I haven't gotten there yet. But you work at it, and the less judging you are, I mean, if we stopped judging all the people around us, we would have many more people around us,
Yeah. So
right?
true.
And with that comes more community and more new ideas and more new energy. And that doesn't mean we enjoy being around negative people. It's just that we can, if you're around somebody that is not supporting you moving forward with your own dreams, then it's sitting around thinking about how awful it is having that person in your life is not as powerful as just moving away from that person and
Yeah.
finding people who are more positive to influence you in your life. So we do make those kinds of discerning, um, fine tuning all the time. And I do believe that that's important too.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to, as you mentioned, to give ourselves permission to move away from those people too, because I think a lot of us are raised otherwise.
Right. And in fact, when I was first writing Begin with Yes, my editor, I was very strong about, if you're around people that are not enriching you, enhancing you, supporting you, then move away. And she said to me, and she was very wise, she goes, well, what if it's your mother?
Hmm.
Or what if it's your spouse? And then the compromise I found, and it has worked for me, is that there are some situations where moving away is either not practical or not possible or not doable right now. And so I switch my attention. That's where I don't have any power. So
Hmm.
where my power lies is finding more positive people to bring into my life. And so sometimes I can't, and I don't even want to not be in a relationship with this person, but I need more positivity in my life. So instead of focusing on the negative experience, I'm going to seek out more positive people to bring into my life, and then that creates a different balance. And
Yeah,
that has
good
worked well
stuff.
for me.
So you're a man of ideas. What do you have next up your sleeve? Something that we can look forward to from you? Are you working on more books
Yeah,
or something
I
else?
actually just gave a book to my publisher,
Hmm.
and this is the first time I've not self-published a book,
Hmm.
and I think a big reason why that happened is because I have so many Begin with Yes fans, that
Hmm.
people in the publishing world see that as a huge asset to
Sure.
the author from a marketing standpoint. And the book that I just turned in is called Be Amazing,
Hmm.
and it's about how little space there is between being okay or pretty good and be amazing, and how easy it is for us to move from that place of being pretty good or okay to amazing. And it's in all areas of our life. And the one that comes to mind instantly for me is one of the things I want to be amazing at is being an amazing grandfather. Um, and I think I'm a pretty good grandfather, but I'd like to be an amazing grandfather.
Hmm.
So the process, and this is true for whether you want to be an amazing physician, airline pilot, grandfather, mother, neighbor, friend, whatever, is, well, what does that look like? we never stop and say, well, what does an amazing grandfather look like? And the answer is really not all that complicated. It's like, for me, if I can take a minute just to tell you what I think that is for me, it's like Skyping with my grandchildren once a week, remembering their birthdays, remembering what their special interests are, and picking up a book that reinforces their interests or acknowledges their interests, spending alone quality time with one kid at a time. I've got 4 grandchildren, and when everyone's together, it's a big fun fest. But it's even nicer to be able to spend time one at a time with my grandchildren. So I sort of describe what an amazing grandfather would look like, and now I know what I have to do to be an amazing grandfather. And none of those things I just described are out of my reach or out of anybody's reach, and then make it possible. And so that sort of simplification of what does an amazing breakfast restaurant look like, and your idea of an amazing could be different than mine, and it doesn't mean my amazing restaurant is better than your amazing restaurant. It just means that if I define what an amazing restaurant is, and then I focus on meeting those goals, then I will have an amazing restaurant. It might be different than your amazing restaurant, but let's have lots of amazing restaurants. Let's have lots of amazing grandparents. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
Back to those
it's
actionable
like
steps.
let's all be amazing at
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. Well, Paul Boynton, you're a beautiful soul, and it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I have to say about you that
Oh, no.
no, I just before we go, before you push me off the air, I just you meet people, and this is the first time we've even actually talked face to face, because all of our conversations have been email or by phone. But I had a project and I was looking for somebody that could help me, and I reached out to my friend Jacob, and he said, you were the person that could help me, and I reached out to you, and we discovered that we worked very well together. We could enrich each other's lives, and that's what you've done by helping me with a project, and being an amazing designer of book covers, which led me to discover your books, and that you're an amazing. I love mysteries, and so now I'm a big fan of your writing as well. So,
Oh, thank you.
and it's like that's the joy that comes from life, right? Connecting, meeting new people, and that's what makes me happy.